This episode of Dorking Out is brought to you by Oceanic Airlines, taking you places you've never imagined.
And guilt. Did you promise yourself you weren't going to eat the whole thing, but you did anyway? Then you need guilt.
Houston, flight is go.
Mila, let's go. SPM. Safety contact.
From Assignment X, Amalgamated Storytelling, and thesoniashow.com, it's Dorking Out with Sonia Mansfield and Christopher Allen Smith.
Welcome to episode 70 of Dorking Out, a podcast for people who like to dork out about stories and the stories and culture that we love. That means movies and TV, books and podcasts, and everywhere else we find stories that interest us. This is the David Fincher's Mindhunter and Star Trek Discovery Edition. With me today is my co-host, professional author and writer of The Sonia Show, a blog of her incessant binge drinking, which caused us to miss last week's show. This is 100% true. Sonia Mansfield, when will you stop drinking?
Never! Last week's episode could have been like our Lost Weekend episode.
It could have been if you had been able to stumble your way towards a mic. But unfortunately,
it's totally what happened.
You are completely irresponsible, and I, for one, Sonia, would like to speak for every one of the audience members out there to tell you how disappointed I am in causing us to miss a week. How could you do this? I'm sorry.
You're not the boss of me.
That's true.
Look, I could quit anytime I want.
I just don't want to. That time never comes. That's all.
I don't want to, because people who quit drinking, they're just quitters.
That's
and
right.
I am not a quitter.
They're quitters and they're boring.
And with me today is my co-host, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker and compulsive liar, Christopher Allen Smith.
Hey there, Sonia. How you doing?
I'm drunk.
All right. So actually, a tiny personal announcement. I was not here last week because earlier in the month, my beloved wife, Laura Smith, who got into a semi-serious car accident.
Yes, she did. It sounded scary.
While going to the airport to fly away, to fly out of the state. She had finally made her decision. She was leaving me. She was leaving the kids. She was on her way. And then...
Here comes the compulsive lying.
That's
again.
right. And then a car came careening. This part's true. A car came careening across the freeway median. Crashed right into her. Her car flipped. She got rushed to the hospital. MRI, CT scans, all over the place. It was
super scary.
Very scary. She is recovering in the next room. Dizzy, because here's the thing. I didn't know this. There's a thing called post-concussion syndrome, which is you get a concussion, your head hurts, but you seem to be on the mend, and then like a week or two later, you get it like kicks in or something happens, and she has been as dizzy as an Irish drunk. And if you know anything about Irishmen...
She's as dizzy as Sonia.
That's right. If you know anything about Irishmen, let me tell you about Irishmen, Sonia. Naturally, they don't have good balance.
Awful stereotype.
So when you get them drunk and they're Irish, they're just falling all over the place. Anyway, she was more dizzy than that. It was quite impressive. No, but it'll be funny when the... opposing lawyers listen to this episode to get our state of mind around the time of the accident. Yeah. How much fun they're going to have parsing the lies from the truth. It sounds like
you're having a lot of emotional distress.
Well, I am. This is how I suppress my grief and sorrow and fear, by lying and bashing Irishmen. So, Judge O'Connell, I would just like to take this opportunity to apologize for this recording. No. They're not. They can't be judges. They're too drunk. All right. Anyway.
Everyone's too drunk.
So, she's on the mend. It's a long, complex thing that it's just hard. We're kind of feeling our way day by day. That's why there was the accident. I had one episode, and then last week it was like, no, I can't do this. We're not doing this.
Yeah.
So
no, and obviously, like family first. Like,
right.
It's just a show. It can wait.
Yes. Besides, nothing good came out anyway. Anyway.
Actually, it gave me more time to finish Mindhunter.
Did you finish it?
I did.
Holy smokes, look at that.
I know. Should I do the rundown?
Yeah, so you know what? Let's do the rundown and get this ball rolling. So we just want to say thank you to everybody that's listening. Thank you to all your prayers and kindnesses on the Facebook and whatever. And thank you to Jeff
Thank you
Bond.
for the thoughts and prayers and fruit baskets.
That's right. Even though Sonia complains about Fruit Basket and what did she send my wife? On this very show, she made fun of fruit baskets. And what did she send my wife?
Was it a fruit basket?
You know it was a fruit basket. You sent it to her. Sorry. Why are you asking me? You know.
I think there was chocolate and nuts in there, too.
Yeah, nuts. That's great. Anyway.
Brain food. Trying to help her.
That's right. Sonia, would you like to do the...
I know if it was you, I would just send you like a whole case of like SpaghettiOs or something.
God. Jeez.
A whole bunch of Progresso clam chowder.
You say that like it's a bad thing. You say that with this derision that, frankly, I don't think it deserves. What you should be sending me is Willy Wonka's bottle caps, because that candy is so good and responsible for the diabetes. But anyway, we've made our audience listen long enough to your incessant rambling.
In this week's episode, we are going to review the new Netflix series Mindhunter. The 10-episode series is executive produced by David Fincher. Is it amazing like ZODIAC or lame like The Curious Case of Benjamin Button?
Button
You'll
was
have
good.
to listen to find out.
Sorry.
For our second segment, we have a little quick chat about what we're dorking out about this week because we need to catch up. And finally, Chris talks about 2 weeks worth of Star Trek Discovery with Alexandra August and Jeff Bond. We have a ton to talk about. So let's get this podcast started.
As a loyal listener to Dorking Out, you might have noticed that we don't talk much about cop shows on TV. And that partially could be my bias because police procedurals is one of the oldest genres in the medium. It's been around since the 50s, and it's so picked over and redone with your Dragnets, your Adam 12s, your Hill Street Blues, your Law and Orders, your CSIs, your Southlands, your True Detectives, that there is very little new to do. The most interesting, engaging things on TV tend not to be cop shows. Argue with us on Twitter if you must.
Or him.
So when David Fincher announced plans to adapt Mindhunter, a nonfiction book by pioneering FBI criminal profiler John Douglas, about the early days of the FBI's famous behavioral science unit, I was not sure what to expect. I love David Fincher, and like a lot of modern fanboys, I am with the consensus that he's one of the best directors working today. But he's a kind of a peculiar taste. His movies tend to be pretty grim. ZODIAC, Benjamin Button's fun. Fight Club, Seven, The Game, Panic Room. So he's got some pretty dark. Oh yeah, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Sweet Christmas. That was a dark movie.
Yeah, that movie was hilarious.
Anyway, so he's been talking while promoting Mindhunter. He's kind of having a little bit of a rough go, or he's more interested, I should say, in starting to work on TV, like a lot of interesting storytellers. He's having a tougher time to get his kind of stuff off the ground in the age of the Avengers. So the question is the new Netflix show, also called Mindhunter, just a retread of Seven, ZODIAC, or Girl with the Dragon Tattoo? Or has Fincher found a patch of untilled soil in the cop show genre and given us something unique and interesting while still having the subject be something as treaded over as FBI agents and serial killers? Sonia, what say you?
Yes. I really love this show. I super love it. So I am someone who actually likes like cop shows and stuff. I haven't watched them in a long time. I think because they are so picked over and played out, and they're really just, hey, let's investigate this dead hooker story. Like that's what they are. They're all like dead hooker like stories now. They're all like Criminal Minds. I can't get on board with that, but I like what this show does, how it's different from like serial killer TV shows and movies. It's kind of showing how all the ideas and all the language that are so commonplace now in like all these shows were created in the first place.
Right.
And I think even the term serial killer is like, they talk like they throw it out there as like how it came about, and it's like this show is like a prequel to the modern procedural.
Right.
And I like that. And one of the things it reminded me of was, did you watch Masters of Sex on Showtime?
I did. And this is a fantastic comparison.
I actually only watched like the first season and bailed, but I feel like so much of this show reminded me of Masters of Sex. It's like, it's the same show, but it's like, instead of sex, it's serial killers.
Exactly. That's right. I've heard this be called like a cross between Mad Men and a cop show. To me, which I think, but I think Masters of Sex is a better connection because it actually shows kind of a different era where people lived in an ignorance that we almost have a hard time understanding now because of, everything that we've known or learned since from the 70s until now. But you get to see smart people at the top of their game really trying to figure stuff out and trying to figure stuff out and figure out how this works. I mean, the thing that I like about it, and I don't watch a lot of cop shows anymore, is it's not it's these two FBI agents, Holden Ford and Bill Tench, played by Jonathan Groff and Holt McCallany. Is,
by the way, this is the best Jonathan Groff has ever been.
This is the only thing I've seen him in.
Like every time I've seen him before, I'm like, oh, it's that guy, whatever. This is the best he's ever been.
Right.
That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, he's
Holt McCallany, is that how you pronounce it? He's really good.
I think
McCallany. He's very like in a not as showy role, I think, but also super awesome.
Yeah. And also, we should.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay, because I kind of interrupted. We should also mention Wendy Carr, who plays a professor that works with him. But the thing is this is not a show, with a guy like David Fincher, you have Seven, which is a severely difficult movie. You have ZODIAC, which is a surprisingly light movie for being about the Zodiac killer. There are a couple moments where it's grim, really grim. But it's also got this weird underlaced humor to it. And this, I would say, when halfway through this show, I was feeling like this is kind of Zodiac, the TV show. It's got that weird undercurrent of humor and, the David Fincher patented unending feeling of dread and creepiness.
Yeah. That's so funny. I wrote that. I wrote, it's dark and cold and creepy and filled with dread.
Right, exactly. But it's not off-putting. It doesn't do it in an off-putting way. And the thing that I like about it, and why I would strongly recommend people who don't usually watch police procedurals give this show a chance, is because these are they're not two cops trying to go around solving murders, two FBI agents trying to go around solving murders. They're trying to solve murder. They're attacking this societal problem of why do people murder other people with all the stuff going on from the 70s, and all the new kind of crimes that were popping up around that time, and trying to figure out why it's happening. And their idea is to go around and interview serial killers and figure out what makes them tick, which, this is their work, is the work that Tom Harris, who did, all of the Hannibal Lecter books, came from. Every serial killer, FBI agent, everything
is based on,
came out of these years and this team of people. But what's interesting, what I really liked, is Holden Ford and Bill Tench are fictional stand-ins for Jonathan Douglas and someone else whose name escapes me. But so they're stand-ins.
Robert Ressler.
Right, that's right. So you have this fantastic. They're talking about real cases and what this team really did, but the characters were not like handcuffed to what the people actually did. So they interview, like serial killers like Ed Kemper and, several others, in a real way. And I've heard some of the tapes of Ed Kemper and what they have Ed Kemper saying on the show, and they're identical.
Yeah.
You can tell that they're extremely faithful, but because they have the FBI characters fictionalized to an extent, they're able to really kind of get inside the psychology of what it takes to
do this kind of work. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really love the relationship too between Holden and Bill. Like, I feel like it's not your typical buddy cop relationship. I like that, like, Holden is the younger of the two, so he kind of goes all in on their profiling, and he's really eager to, like, apply that to active investigations. And Bill is a little older and maybe like a little bit more old school and is better at navigating like FBI politics. And there's like kind of this like respect, but there's also frustration because each of them want the other to do it their way.
Right.
But they need each other.
Right.
And like, Holden kind of pulls Bill into like more modern thinking, and Bill kind of makes him follow the rules a little bit more, and they balance each other out, which is what good partners do. Right. And I think it's interesting to watch.
Right. Well, that's the thing it's funny because this show, it's kind of like, this is going to sound really weird. It's kind of like Lord of the Rings in that when you read a bunch of fantasy or watch a bunch of fantasy stuff, and then you go back to Lord of the Rings, a lot of it is like, oh, this is, you're kind of underwhelmed by Lord of the Rings a little bit because it's kind of like, I've seen all this before 15 times.
Right.
Here, there's a lot of dynamics of the old veteran cop interacting with the young, idealistic, hard-charging cop. There's the supervisor that's irritated and frustrated by what his team is doing when they're kind of going off the reservation and kind of yelling at them. There's finding creepy, horrible, awful cases that they're working on. There's going to talk to a serial killer and trying to get inside their psychology, which is very Silence of the Lambs. But it's kind of like, this is the original version. This is the real thing, as opposed to all the copies of a copy of a copy. And it seems like David Fincher and the creative team here is so attuned to that things kind of feel familiar, but they never become cliche. They never, like when you see the FBI deputy director or whatever hollering at him, you can see his frustration. You can understand why he's mad at them, but he's also not just like a dunderhead. And they do this with Bill Tench too, which is they have a hard time seeing the future and seeing how this can work when Holden Ford is kind of pushing against him, but they're not close-minded jerks.
Right.
They are convinced, and they kind of go along. Bill Tench more than their unit chief boss. Yeah. And it's just really, it's just so good. And after a first very grim episode, or a first grim 5 minutes, I would say.
Yeah.
Do we see another murder in the rest of the 10 hours? I don't think we do.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's just, it's a lot of people. And this is why, for me, it felt like...
No, I mean, it's all after the fact,
Right. For me, and that's kind of why this is a lot more like ZODIAC than any of Fincher's other movies, is a lot of it is just people sitting around talking and trying to figure it out. With ZODIAC, it has this reputation of being this very grim, dark serial killer, but I think the murders are over in like the first 40 minutes, and then there's another almost 2 hours of movie,
right,
where it's just interesting characters, smart, really trying to figure things out, and it's just it is it is really good, really, and that's the thing is, and I think this is a binding thread in a lot of the stuff that we talk about on the show, is this is a show that is asking a big question, which is, how do, flawed human beings with day jobs as FBI agents or any kind of day jobs solve a societal problem like murder? It's been here for millions of, thousands of years. How do you fix it? Most people would say you can't, don't even try, but watching smart people try to do an incredibly difficult job and starting to make some headway and starting to make things better, while at the same time just living in this very grim but also very interesting world, is just, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I super love this show. We watch a lot of TV shows for this podcast.
Yeah.
And I will start those shows. I maybe watch a few episodes so we can talk about it. And the truth is, like, I don't go back.
Right.
I don't always finish. And I watched every episode of this one. Like, I couldn't wait to watch the next ones. Like, it's a really, like, it's kind of a perfect October show.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I also want to mention, Anna Torv. Is that how you pronounce it? From Fringe. She plays Dr. Wendy Carr.
Yes.
She's really good on the show. And I think it's an important role too. It sucks that, like, all these serial killers, they're all, I guess they call them deviants, and they just murder women.
Right.
Like, it's a bunch of, like, murdered women, and that can be, like, a little, it's depressing and it's hard to watch and listen to. And I think including this is a true story, so of course she's part of it, Dr. Wendy, but
right.
I think she plays an important role,
right,
for women watching the show too, just to that there was a woman working on this as well. Right. And I really, really like Cameron Britton, who plays Ed Kemper. He is terrifying to me.
He is. Let me ask you about him then, because I hope I'm not sharing too much of myself when I ask you about this. That is a reaction I've heard from a lot of people, and he is really terrifying for me in the last episode.
Yeah, that's why he terrifies me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because in the for most of I think there's like 3 or 4 episodes where they go and talk to him.
Yeah.
It's like he's terrifying in theory, but one of the weird things and kind of funny things about the show is when Holden Ford goes to talk to him for the first time, Ed Kemper keeps trying to be hospitable to him.
Yeah.
And say, "Oh, can I get you a sandwich? Do you like this?" And Holden's going, "No, that's fine." And because he's like a serial killer and has done some things that they explained that makes him just supremely creepy. But he's kind of like your next door neighbor that you don't really want to hang out with, but you have to be polite to, kind of. So you want to say no, don't go to the trouble, but they really want to go to the trouble, so then you kind of give in, and then it's like, and it's really funny and it's just very strange. But then at another point in that thing, he's all, well, as you know, Holden is kind of questioning some of the things that he's saying about why he did what he did. And then at a certain point, Ed Kemper goes, well, I don't know. I'm not a professional. I'm just an extremely accomplished murderer. Like that. He's kind of being sarcastic, but also kind of true.
That's why he terrifies me, because then what we see in that final episode is, he almost felt like kind of a joke in the beginning, like he was like sending them cards and they're like boring and like hanging, they were like over it. They were done talking to him.
Right.
And that final episode shows like what a monster he is and how terrifying he is, and maybe like a glimpse of what it was like to be his victim.
Right.
Because he is so unassuming, because he's so polite, because he's so like being a good host, and then all of a sudden just the creep factor dials up to 10. And watching it, I found myself like, I was on the couch and I was like bringing my legs up, like curling up into a ball. And like I had my hands like on my face. Like I was really nervous.
Yeah, it was.
In that scene, it was a really good scene. And I mean, that's the stuff that's direct. David Fincher did the first 2 episodes. He did the last 2 episodes. And, he knows a little something about dread and tension. So it totally worked on me.
Right. Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And yeah, I'm glad that you talked about Anna Torv as Wendy, because there's a lot of discussion about diversity. There's a lot of discussion about, and while it's one of those things that's obviously something in storytelling that makes things richer and better when it's done well. I've seen I think we've both seen, and I don't mean to speak for you, like scenes, like a lot of these CSI shows and stuff, it's almost as though the network executives are going through with a checklist and, all right, we have our white male lead, we have our smart African-American this, and then we have the cheeky kind of hot girl who works in the lab, and then it never really...
Yeah, they do.
It never really coheres. It as well-intentioned as it is, from a storytelling point of view, it just... well, you know what? Now that I think about it, those shows are kind of cartoons anyway. This relationship between Wendy Carr, Bill Tench, and Holden Ford is really fun to watch because it really is the smartest people around. She plays a professor from Harvard, I think.
Yeah.
That is into, criminal psychology and all this stuff, and she's actually helping them and promoting them and telling the FBI, "Hey, you should let these guys do their work, and you know what? I'm going to come down and work with them because they're so awesome." And it shows diversity, and it shows these kinds of interactions and working together that I think we all kind of aspire for or hope for, but it does it in this very realistic, very real way that is just a lot of fun, very satisfying to watch.
Well, it's interesting is I read some things where some people were complaining about, this is just a bunch of guys who kill women, and like she's the smartest person in the room and she doesn't go on the interviews and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, first of all, this is all based on true stuff.
Right.
So if she didn't go on the interviews, she didn't go on the interviews. I don't know what to tell you. But also, like, these guys would never talk to her because they did kill women.
Right.
I'm sorry, like, we can't change the story. We can't change the history
we can't
it's
change
just
how
the way
people
it
act.
is. Like when they're interviewing, like for they're expanding their team.
Yes.
And one of the candidates is an African American guy, and Bill says we should hire him. He's the best candidate. And she says most of the people we're interviewing are awful racists. They'll never talk to him.
Right.
And it's like, that's interesting. And, so yes, it sucks. Like there's a lack of diversity on a show like this, but it's part of the story.
Right.
If that
right.
makes sense.
Well, it is. And that's the thing. That was really, I don't want to say a fantastic moment, but it was a very interesting moment of how institutions perpetuate racial problems.
Right.
Even when they're trying and they desperately want to change them. Because it makes sense. This African-American guy comes in. He's the most qualified. We've got to hire him, but our job is to talk to racists.
Right.
So we can't. So the racist criminals, in a weird sense, get to veto this promising African-American FBI agent's career. But actually, now that I say that, I'm wondering if, and this is maybe where we're going to wrap up, I'm wondering if that character is going to come back next season. Because David Fincher has said that the season 2 of Mindhunter is going to center around the Atlanta child murders. So don't worry, Sonia. It's not going to be a bunch of women being murdered next year. It's going to be a bunch of kids.
Oh, yay.
Anyway.
I'm going to start crying.
And if anyone knows anything about the Atlanta child murders, they were mostly African-American kids killed, or maybe all African-American kids killed by an African-American serial killer. So, I'm not going to make a diversity joke right here, because that would be in poor taste. But I know a lot of you were expecting me to, so I just want to say, shame on you. Anyway, is there anything else we want to say about it?
I think I said everything.
Oh, wait.
I wanted to.
Hold on. I forgot.
Good show.
Hold on. Sorry. Hannah Gross as Holden Ford's girlfriend. Debbie Mitford was, I thought, really fantastic. A great, very meaningful, girlfriend role, but she's also studying psychology, I think. So her and Holden have all these very interesting discussions in a very kind of professional, portrait of a professional husband and wife, even though they're not married. What did you think of her? Because I've heard some kind of pushback that she's kind of a flat, monotone character or whatever, but I don't understand that. I thought she was
I actually really liked her. I thought she was a really good character and a really interesting character, and I liked her interactions with Holden, and I think she plays an important role in like giving us an insight into what he's like, how he's changing,
right? How
this job is, changing him,
right?
And I liked her. I didn't know that people didn't like her.
I've heard some stuff.
She is kind of like, the character can be like a little like stoic, I guess. She can be a little deadpan or flat, but I think that's just, I don't think that's the actress. I think that's the kind of person she is. She's very guarded.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought, and but I mean that's the way it is. Not to get up on a soapbox, but I still don't understand people who don't like Skylar from Breaking Bad. There's some certain kinds of women.
That is so funny. I just got into that discussion with a friend of mine a couple weeks ago, and I was like, I don't understand you. Like,
all right, who was this person? Name them by name. Who was this? No,
it was Amanda.
What? Oh, I'm just kidding. I thought it was going to be some dude.
No, it's my friend Amanda. And she was like, she was like, she's annoying. And I was like, no, she's.
Amanda, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to actually out you.
I was like, Skylar's right. She's actually trying to do the right thing. But I think we're also conditioned to root for whoever the lead is. Like, even when they're a bad person, that like, somehow Skylar's like pesky, like trying to make him do the right thing is frustrating to some people.
Right.
Yeah. And I was like, I told her, I was like, you're wrong.
No, you are 100% right, Sonia. And I'm glad we never really talked about Breaking Bad on this show to that depth. And yes, you have the correct reading of Skylar, and you have the correct reading of Mindhunter.
Topic 2, what we're dorking out about this week. We haven't had an opportunity to talk about what we're dorking out about, which is a damn shame considering the title of the podcast is Dorking Out. So we wanted to do like a quick little chat and talk about what we're watching or reading or whatever. So I'm going to jump right in. I've been dorking out about scary movies. I had such a good time watching it and being scared of something that wasn't the news that I've been kind of chasing the It dragon ever since. And I've been watching a ton of scary movies. So I wanted to run down my list and then like highlight two of these as ones that I really, really recommend. So I watched and by the way, all of these are good movies. I haven't watched one bad one. I like them all.
No,
I liked all of them.
Actually, yeah, okay.
So I saw The Witch, very creepy. I saw Beyond the Gates, very entertaining. Tales of Halloween is like an anthology, like a horror anthology.
Oh wait, that's with Dana Gould, right?
Yes.
Yes.
It's really good. His segment's really good too. Like it's a really good mix. Like there's some that are like really funny and there's some that are like a little bit more serious. It's really, really good. And because there's like 10 stories. So if you don't like one, like just wait like 2 minutes and the next one will be on. It's really good.
Cool.
I went and saw Christine. John Carpenter's Christine was playing at the theater here in San Francisco. And that was really fun. I took my niece. And I've been watching a bunch of Vincent Price movies because Vincent Price is rad. So I watched The Tingler and The House on Haunted Hill. And then this is one of the movies I want to shout out. It's called Diary of a Madman.
That's a fantastic title.
And it's really, really good. He gets possessed by an evil spirit that drives him to commit murder, basically. And Vincent Price is so good in it. And you never see the spirit or anything. So sometimes he's just acting by himself in a room, like engaging with nothing. It's actually just a really good, like entertaining movie. Like not in a like ridiculous, like The Tingler kind of way. Like I thought it was really good. So it's 1963, Diary of a Madman.
Okay.
I also saw The Horror of Dracula. It's 1958 with Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. And that one was really fun. But the other one I want to mention is Carnival of Souls. Have you ever seen Carnival of Souls?
I have not. Who's in that?
It's 1962 and it doesn't have anyone famous in it. But I think if you saw like what the creepy ghosts look like, you'd be like, oh.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's got this look. It's shot in black and white. And it's just Roger Ebert compared it to, he said it was like a lost episode of The Twilight Zone, which is really the perfect way to describe it. It's 80 minutes long. It is like the easiest watch, but and it's really you can tell like it's influenced directors. So like George Romero and David Lynch, they all cite it as like a movie that inspires them. Mm-hmm. And it's about this woman who's the sole survivor of a car accident. And then after the accident, she moves to a new town where she's kind of being stalked by these like creepy looking ghosts, basically. And it's just, some people say it's kind of slow. I don't think it's slow at all. Like, I think it's just building that like dread. And it's just a really tight, good watch. I really liked it.
So, a couple questions.
Yes.
I have been interested on and off. I'll lay my cards on the table, and I think I say this every time we talk about horror movies. I like movies from every genre, but I find horror movies I tend to like the least. You know what I mean? Like, if I watch 10 horror movies, I'm going to probably like 2 or 3 of them. And but I've heard a lot about The Witch, but I've heard some people that are into horror just really don't like it and think it's just a bunch of nothing.
That's weird.
And some people say it is fantastic and they love it and they're super creeped out about it.
Creepy.
I like, and this is kind of where I put my cards on the table a little bit. Paranormal Activity. A lot of people who are supposedly into horror, scary movies don't like that movie. And for me, that is one of the creepiest, one of the best movies. I think there's a contingent of horror fans that like to see blood and guts. And
Yeah,
and
well,
the dread is just a way to get to the blood and guts. And
yeah,
for me, it's all about dread.
yeah,
And
well,
Paranormal
yeah,
Activity is nothing but dread.
yeah. I mean, horror's like any other genre, right? It
Right.
has its own like subgenres.
Right.
So there's people that are like, no, I just like slasher stuff. I like Halloween. I like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like that sort of thing. And then there's the people that like something like The Witch or Silence of the Lambs or,
Right.
things that are a little bit more like creepy,
Yeah.
that dread that you're talking about, not necessarily like, that
Right.
type of movie.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I'm super into slasher movies. I haven't watched one in a really long time, so I can't say, that I don't like them, but I've just really been into watching these lately.
What?
And I really don't think it's like an October thing. Like, I think it's because when I went and saw it, I just enjoyed that feeling so much.
No kidding. All right. Well, what is Witch? Is it like a Paranormal Activity where it's all dread and slow? Because for me, horror
I will
movies,
say
I like them when they're slow in a weird way.
It's slow. Like
Uh-huh.
it's definitely slow. It kind of reminds. I haven't read like a ton of stuff, so maybe like everybody's written this, but it kind of reminds me of The Crucible,
Okay.
the one with Daniel Day-Lewis
Uh-huh.
that came out. When was that, in the 90s? Right?
Yeah. That was back before he became a living god.
I just yeah, no, it's definitely slow, and it's a little like you don't know what's happening. You don't know why the things are happening that are happening. It's creepy.
Okay.
I think you would like it, actually.
I'm
And
gonna give
people
it a
who are
shot.
saying that it's not horror are ridiculous. It is 100% a horror movie.
Right. Okay. Cool. Well, yeah. All right. Thanks. So you've talked me into it. And then what's Beyond the Gates about?
That one's kind of weird. It's a little lower budget, I think, but I like that it's filled with like a lot of practical effects. It's about these two brothers who their father passes away, so they're cleaning out his video store that he owns,
Mhm.
and they find like a board game that's like a board game like with a videotape, and
Oh wow.
it kind of like opens up this evil Jumanji, if you
It
will.
opens up a portal to a place that's great, like a like a great yogurt shop. Is that what
Yes.
the portal opens up to?
Yes, exactly.
All right. Cool.
It's like you've seen it.
Yes, I have. It's great. But unfortunately, all the yogurt is past its due date, so you get food poisoning.
It's all clam chowder yogurt.
God, what do you have against clam chowder? Seriously, this makes no sense. You keep poking me at it like I'm supposed to be apologetic in some way.
Have you not been watching The Good Place?
No, you know what?
When everything gets
I
in
haven't.
the okay.
I need. I need.
They
to,
replace
I need to go
all
back.
the yogurt places with like clam chowder places, and there's like a clam chowder fountain and all this stuff. It's really funny.
I'm kind of banking them up. I do need to get back to it. So.
Okay.
All right.
But anyway,
Okay.
what are you dorking out about?
So what I've started to do in recent weeks is watch. I'm trying to watch the movies that are, putting their toe in the water for Oscars 2018. So I've seen 3 movies, and they're kind of fall serious movies. The kind of movies that we talk a lot about on this show not getting made anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The first one was Marshall, about a young Thurgood Marshall, and that stars Chadwick Boseman. I want to say Chadwick Boseman, and Josh Gad as lawyers who are working to get this African American chauffeur off from rape charges in Connecticut. And if you think that there's not a lot of racism in Connecticut, you haven't been paying attention to Connecticut. Anyway, so that was good. That was interesting. That's back in the 1940s. It's like a very competently well-made, not spectacular, but I don't know. Sometimes you're just if you're in the mood for a nice mid-range drama about, what's funny is it's called Marshall. It's about
I'm
Thurgood
always
Marshall.
in the mood for that.
Right. It's about Thurgood Marshall, so you kind of expect, this is the episode. This is the episode where Thurgood Marshall argues for Brown versus Board of Education. It's a season finale. Anyway, you would expect that a movie called Marshall is about Thurgood Marshall and his big moments. This is not a from birth to death story. This is one case in one area that makes it a little bit more enjoyable and a little bit more comprehensible. And it's not his big case. It's not when he got on the Supreme Court. It's not when he argued.
Maybe it's going to be a franchise, Smith.
That would be, we joke about this, but like a Thurgood.
Oh my God, I want to watch the Thurgood Marshall franchise.
The Thurgood Marshall connected universe would be great. No, listen to me. This is, we joke about this, and we kind of joked about this when I talked about the presidents of the United States connected universe. You could do this. So you start out with Thurgood Marshall in the 30s. Then he goes into the 50s and he starts arguing Brown versus Board of Education while he meets spinoff character Martin Luther King. And then they both kind of march to expand civil rights. And then near the end of the franchise, Thurgood Marshall gets onto the Supreme Court. Martin Luther King gets killed. You have Malcolm X in there. As something that would be the story of the civil rights era told in a Marvel-like interconnected universe. And for all of you people rolling your eyes, this is a fantastic idea. I would watch the hell out of these movies.
Awesome idea.
Anyway,
I'm on board.
So
let's put it together, Smith.
That's right. So yes, this would be a pretty good beginning to a Thurgood Marshall connected universe. It's a good movie. Not fantastic, not the best movie. I don't think it's going to make a lot of waves in Oscar season, but it's got that kind of Oscar-y vibe in it. Like this is the studio swinging for the fence. It's directed by Reginald Hudlin, who directed, or he was in Django. Oh, weird. All right. Well, I was going to go to his Internet Movie Database and start to list off a bunch of stuff. But some of his credits are not... Let's see. He did Boomerang, Ladies Man, did some Bernie Mac episodes. I thought he had done more. What am I thinking? Anyway, all right. Well, now we know why it's a good but not great movie. Anyway, then the next movie I saw was Professor Marsden and the Wonder Women, which tells the story of psychologist William Marsden and the I'm getting this from the Internet Movie Database. This is not my own fan fiction. And the polyamorous relationship he had and his wife had with his mistress, but not really his mistress. It was their mistress. And also the creation of Wonder Woman, the comic book. This is an interesting movie. That I think sank like a stone, if I remember correctly. It's interesting because you almost, people talk about sex and violence in the movies. There's almost no sex in the movies anymore. It's almost all gone. Have you noticed that? Even in R-rated movies, they might like show some stuff, but back in the 80s, there were simulations of people having sex a lot. Like that was like a whole R-rated genre of movies for adults that they're all gone. Anyway,
it's true.
This is what's interesting is it's the story of, you would almost expect this to be kind of like a LGBT type movie where they're telling a story set in the past to show how hard things were and the struggles people went through to kind of get rights or to, find self-worth or whatever. But you don't really find it with kind of heterosexual stories, but there's a lot of those same currents of being true to yourself and being true to who you love and being true to how you love while not being gay back then. Anyway, it's a good movie. It's not the best, but it's the performances. I think it's one of those things where the writing was a little too on the nose, a little too. We have to communicate this information, because it tells a story of over 20 years. We have to communicate what happened to these people in the last 5 years in this one scene. So they're kind of talking not exactly like people would talk.
It's all explanatory.
It's a lot of explanatory stuff. So it stars Luke Evans, Rebecca Hall, and Bella Heathcote, which, holy smokes, does she look like Heather Graham. It is freakish how much she looks like Heather Graham from Boogie Nights. It's just, anyway. So it's a good movie, but it also talks about what it means. Can you love two people at the same time, and what does that mean? And all of this is kind of pouring into the creation of Wonder Woman and how he put his ideas about psychology and relationships and this whole idea of being happy through submission and all this stuff into Wonder Woman.
You think this movie would do well at the box office with Wonder Woman,
Well,
they want Wonder Woman any way they can get her, kind of thing.
Well, yeah, it is a little bit of a question on why this movie didn't do that great. And actually, as I'm saying this,
I have to say, I don't think the title does it any favors.
Well, that's true, but I mean, they got Wonder Woman in the title, so I gotta feel something for them. But you're right; it's not. It's a little wordy, but I'm wondering if this is, for all the stuff we just talked about with Marshall and not making movies like this anymore. I'm wondering if this is why they don't make movies like this anymore, because they kind of sink like a stone.
Well, that's what's so a big bummer about Blade Runner's reception.
Yeah.
Like, it's gotten great reviews, but it hasn't exactly lit the box office on fire. And it totally bums me out, because here's like an adult movie, not adult like, but like a movie for grown-ups.
Right.
And the grown-ups didn't come out to see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, hey, dummies, go to the movies and give it your money.
Yeah, exactly.
So that they'll make more like that.
Yeah. Well, you know what? $1.5 million this movie has made domestically. I don't know what the budget is, but well, it is interesting because this is not something. This is something that I've, as you've grown up. Actually, you live in San Francisco. Tell me if you've seen this. I think across the country, or maybe it's just in California, there's a lot of people questioning what it means to have a successful relationship and how you have a good marriage and how you have real relationships that, span 50 years. And there's a lot in this movie of how you love and how you let the fears of the world change your relationships and put pressure on your relationships. Kind of, when do you fight back and when do you give in to societal pressures? It's interesting. Have you found that as in marriages that you've seen or long-term relationships in San Francisco, that people are starting to ask some of these questions about polyamory or open relationships or that kind of stuff? Or am I
have not seen that. At least they're not
San
talking
Francisco?
about they're not talking about it with me.
All right. Well, maybe they're not interested in me joining them. I don't know. Well, not necessarily you joining them, but just talking about this as a thing, All right. Well, shit. Whoops. Hold on.
So all of your movies are based on true stories.
Oh, wow. I did not notice that, but you are 100% correct, Sony Mansfield, because my last movie is American Made with Tom Cruise as Barry Seal, an American pilot who worked for the CIA in the 80s. And what a weird... It's a good movie. And, that's the thing is... I think we've talked about this off mic, but I'm going to say it on mic, is I think I almost feel like I have to defend Tom Cruise now because of his reputation or whatever, which I
Right.
get. I totally get. He's a schmuck and whatever, and supposedly, but as a character on screen, he is so much fun to watch. And I think he went through a period late 90s, early 2000s where it was just like, ugh, this again. And then
Right.
I think he's gotten old enough so he was like desperate to be I'm the cool guy. Almost like Mission
Yeah.
Impossible 1, Mission Impossible 2 era where it was all I have to be the smartest, quickest, baddest ass in the room. And I can't show any humor and I can't have any lightness because I am, capital T Tom, capital C Cruise.
Right.
But now he's kind of like at that age where it's kind of like, screw it. And he's almost wants to play the dundering fool in a lot of these. And in this movie, he's kind of like a kind of a huckster that is only smart enough to get himself into trouble. And it's fun to watch him do these things until you kind of see the accumulated damage of him, running guns to Nicaragua,
Right.
bringing coke for the CIA, but bringing cocaine back for himself. So while he's working for the, you know what it is? It's a little bit like The Departed, where Jack Nicholson is an informant for the FBI, and because he's an informant, that lets him become a better criminal, because it's kind of
Right.
like, they're never going to arrest me, so I can do what I want. And watching him go through that, there's a lot of kind of conspiracy theories or whatever having to do with, oh God, what's the name of the city in Arkansas where everybody was saying Bill Clinton was helping funnel cocaine into the country, or
I
anyway,
don't remember this.
yeah. Anyway, it was one of those crazy conspiracy theories, but there is a little kernel of truth into it because Barry Seal, I believe, lived in Arkansas and had an airstrip in that town, and he was bringing in cocaine. It's just he wasn't doing it on behalf of Bill Clinton. And this kind of tells that story.
Or so you think.
That's right. I don't think Bill Clinton would have been as hard up for money if he had been running cocaine in the 80s. Anyway,
Right.
Whitewater never would have happened if Bill Clinton had cocaine money. Anyway.
So I have a random question. I haven't seen American Made, so I need to ask you. In the movie, he's married to this blonde woman who's the actress. I can't remember her name.
Mm-hmm.
She looks like a baby compared to him. Is there a reason is it explained, like, why he's married someone so much younger?
Well, what's funny is...
Or are we supposed to believe that they're the same age?
No, we are not supposed to believe they're the same age. What's funny is there is a little bit of kind of combining characters. Is the real Barry Seal, I believe, had several wives. So he...
Right.
And they only reference one in the movie, which is her. But I think the idea is she was some stewardess that on one of the planes he worked on, and that's kind of what happened. But yeah, they don't. Yeah, that doesn't. I don't want to say play up a lot in the movie because it's mainly him being, flying around and doing crazy stuff. But it's also directed, and this is the other reason I really want to see it, because I was kind of on the fence. It's directed by Doug Liman, who... Oh,
yeah.
He did Mr. and Mrs. Smith, fantastic movie. Edge of Tomorrow, fantastic movie. He's done several other movies, and now that I'm looking at his... he did Swingers, which was great. So he's directed a lot of stuff. Oh, yeah, the first Bourne movie. The Bourne Identity he directed. So this is...
He did Go. Did he do Go?
Yes, he did. Yes,
that was an awesome movie.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, that was it. What am I doing? What am I saying? Hold on. Yeah, Swingers, Go, Bourne Identity, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and then Edge of Tomorrow, which is a fantastic movie with Tom Cruise. I thought he had done another one with Tom Cruise. Anyway, so yeah, it's fun. I am really enjoying this stage of Tom Cruise's career. However, Having said that, this is another one of those movies that is not doing great at the box office. So that's kind of sad. But American...
I feel like maybe people just... maybe right now people just want Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible movies and that's it.
There's...
I'm like, is he not picking the right projects, or are people like, maybe they're just really turned off by him right now?
Maybe. That's the thing is, let's look at this. I guess we're going to have our a mini Tom Cruise discussion right now. But
we need to wrap it up soon because we're running long.
Yeah, we will. Don't worry. So, American Made, good movie. Wasn't that big? Oh, that was it. The Mummy. That's right. Oh, you know what? No, here's the problem. The last couple movies he's picked are awful.
Well, that'll do it.
Because here's the thing: so let's look at the early 2000s. So he did The Last Samurai, good movie. Collateral, good movie. War of the Worlds, good to pretty good movie. Mission Impossible 3, pretty great movie. Lions for Lambs, I wouldn't pin that on him. Valkyrie, really good movie, underperformed.
Didn't see it.
You should. That is a good movie. Day and Night, okay. Mission Impossible, fantastic. Yeah, and then Jack Reacher, bleh. Oblivion is fine. Edge of Tomorrow, fantastic. Mission Impossible, fantastic. Jack Reacher, Never Go Back, awful. Maybe the worst movie of his career. The Mummy, unbelievably mediocre and forgettable.
Yes.
And then American Made, which is, a drama about drug running. And, God, this could be
You know what? That's another one, though, with the previews. I'm like, he looks like he's just playing like a cocky young guy. And I was like, first of all, you're not a young guy.
Yeah.
And I'm tired of Tom Cruise pretending like he's 30. I was like, you're not 30. You're 50.
Yeah.
So it could be that people see that preview and they're like, meh.
Could be. It could be. I'm interested to see because he is doing.
It reminded me of that movie Blow. Do you remember that movie?
Vaguely. And I'm
Johnny Depp.
Yeah, I'm not usually a lover of drug running movies or drug movies.
No?
Not really. I don't know. There's just something about them. They just come off as so boring. Like,
You should try drugs.
Maybe I will. All right. On that note, Sonia Mansfield.
Yes.
Is there anything that you would like to say to the audience before you step out and we move on to talk about Star Trek Discovery?
I'll just say goodbye. Hey, want more Dorking Out?
Yep.
You can visit our website at dorkingoutshow.com.
You can.
And you can like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter.
On Twitter.
Do you listen to us on iTunes?
Yep.
It's cool.
It's cool.
We won't tell anyone.
Nope.
Please take a few minutes out of your busy day of pretending to work while you watch cat videos to give us a review on iTunes.
Cat videos!
For some reason, iTunes really cares about reviews, and it helps us attract more listeners, and you want us to have more listeners and be popular and cool, don't you?
Yep.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
And now, on with the show.
Yeah. That brings us to an all-male edition of Status Check Star Trek Discovery. It's been a couple weeks since we've been here. Jeff Bond, my favorite living critic, and Star Trek expert extraordinaire, the world's living resource for all things Seth MacFarlane's Orville. I'm gonna put that flag in the ground now. I think you're in a fantastic spot to take the top spot. Is here. He is going to be talking to us about Star Trek episode 6, Lethe? I don't.
Lethe.
I guess
that's how they pronounced it on the original series, but who knows if that's correct.
And then episode 7, which aired hours ago, Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad, because Mud Squared, I guess, would have been too much of a reveal. Originally, Alexandra August was slated to be with us, but because of last-minute developments in her geek writing job, she is unable to make it. I believe she's writing a piece on how Paul Manafort's indictment affects AMC's Preacher Season 3. Or maybe not. Since we last talked, Star Trek, it's been renewed for Season 2. And but we don't yet know. What do you know about that? Actually, you're actually doing current
very
Star Trek
little,
journalism.
but I mean, I think the talk even before there was any official word was that probably new episodes would be air in 2019 rather than 2018, and there was also a grumbling about that. But I mean, given how a show like this operates as opposed to the syndicated broadcast model where you would do 24 shows per season and air in September and through the spring. This is operating, I think, a little bit more on a Netflix or HBO model, and typically there's more time between production. You do fewer episodes, and that's arguably why shows like this are better. So I think that it's possible maybe we might see something in late 2018 or 2018, but my guess is it's probably going to be early 2019.
So episode 6 revolved around a rescue mission for Sarek, who was on a mission of peace and then had some drama befall him. And actually, tell me, what did you think of episode 6?
I basically liked everything. I think there's still, some unevenness. And what I would say about episode 6 is that it was the first one I've seen where it sort of fell into an A plot, B plot kind of structure, which is something that Next Generation sort of engineered, and the following Star Trek shows all kind of played around with that, where they would have a main story and then a pretty much completely unrelated, maybe character-based or other kind of story that would run parallel to it, and there might be like a minor relationship between those, but it wound up always feeling like, hey, we didn't really have enough plot in this A story, so we needed some filler. And I wouldn't say that's exactly how Lethe played out, because there's a stronger relationship between what's going on with Burnham and Sarek, and this side story with Lorca and his pal Admiral Cornwell. I think that what did kind of make it seem like an A story, B story kind of structure was the fact that, we see Burnham going on a rescue mission. There's a lot of pacing and sort of suspense related to that. It's much more kinetic. And you have the feeling that there's a big emergency going on. And then on the Discovery, Cornwell arrives, and she's all kind of yelly and shouty with Lorca for a bit. Then there's time for them to kick back and have a drink, some seduction, have a complete episode in bed. And I think that, to the extent that I have a criticism of that episode, it's that you sort of start feeling like, how, is there really an emergency? Are they really, is there tension on the ship as they're waiting to see how this rescue goes on? Or is it totally laid back and we have time for this,
for drinks and
seduction
fun
episode? Yeah. But there's a lot of ambition in all of these stories, and we get to see Vulcan. There's the whole idea that there are like kind of Vulcan logic extremists, and it's interesting because it goes back to kind of the way the Vulcans were treated on Enterprise, which I never liked.
Right.
but that the Vulcans really, on the original series, the Vulcans it's much more of an aspirational kind of race. That there's definitely the feeling that this is something we would want to aspire to, and these people have figured everything out, and humans can sort of only try to be as good as the Vulcans are. Whereas on Enterprise, it's like, man, these people are worse than humans ever were. They're basically bigoted. They're all riven with political struggles and disagreements, and they're very kind of insidious and plotting. They almost were more like Romulans than Vulcans.
Right.
So you see some of that, but it's interesting exploration of Sarek's sort of relationship with his own culture, and the fact that he kind of likes to step out with humans, which is something that's not approved of, and he's kind of getting in trouble and pushing the limits of how much he can bring his own family along in Vulcan culture, given that he has a half Vulcan son and has adopted human daughter, and is trying to get them out into Vulcan society. So that I thought was very ambitious, and there's an interesting revelation about how Burnham winds up in Starfleet, because she thinks that she's been rejected, by the Vulcan expeditionary forces or whatever, and it turns out that Sarek basically had to choose between her and Spock in terms of who would be doing that, which it also adds a whole great level to, what we know about Spock and Sarek, and about how Spock basically walked away from, the Vulcan Science Academy. So it's doubly frustrating for Sarek, because he makes this great choice to promote his real flesh and blood son instead of this adopted daughter, when probably Burnham would have been the one to have stuck with the Vulcan training instead, and Spock throws it back in his face. So I think interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, I like that, and this is kind of one of the reasons that I often find myself knee-jerk reacting against kind of the more hardcore Star Trek fans, that they hear, adopted daughter and Ward of Sarek, we never heard about this, or blah, 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 and they start saying, they start going off on this before they even see the episode or the series. But what we get to see, because of these relationships, we get to see Sarek in a much more layered, much more interesting character than we've ever seen him before, and see kind of his we've kind of usually seen him from the standpoint of the Federation or from humans, and now we get to see him how he's viewed on Vulcan as this kind of, man, you really like humans. We're all for you, sorry, but boy, you're really going with this. I hear what you're saying about the way that Enterprise treated the Vulcans, and I guess I do kind of like that they kind of kept that thread going while seeming to kind of integrate it a little bit more. Because correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but I thought in TOS it seemed like a lot of the mystique of the Vulcans came from, they were very aspirational to be logical, and they were working for this, but they were also very kind of closed off to outsiders. So, like, when Spock's Ponfar kicks in, like, even his closest friends had no idea what this is, and I believe McCoy had to explain, this is what's going on. I looked it up in the Vulcan
right
medical text, and let me tell you what's going on, why he's throwing food all over the place. So I think maybe this just might be a factor of, we've seen 650 episodes since then, and a lot of the Vulcan mystique has been stripped away a little bit. But let me ask you this. I'm noticing something, and maybe it's just me being unfair to Discovery. They seem to kind of be losing their way with naming things. In that, in episode 6, so Vulcan logic extremists, that almost feels like, look, we're going to call this something later, but for right now, while we're breaking the story and getting the script kind of into shape, we're just this is what the motivation of these people are, and eventually we're going to rename it, but this is their function in the story. Vulcan logic extremists.
Right, yeah.
And then they never kind of circled back to it. And then in last night's episode, Harry Mudd has these time crystals. And I can imagine in like a previous, like the Next Generation or something, they would have talked to a science advisor to come up with some sort of sciencey name for them. But they seem to be kind of missing that step now. So it's just, well, they're time crystals. That's it.
Yeah,
they do stuff with time.
Seems to me very much maybe an Alex Kurtzman thing, where in the J.J. Abrams movies, it was very much a conscious decision, I think, to get away from like the TNG technobabble. And basically reduce things to like, okay, what's the simplest metaphor we can use to get this across to an audience? And this happens like at the very beginning of, the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie, where they have some space phenomenon, and
lightning storm in space,
like a lightning storm in space, and then so what he's talking about. When they repeat that, 2 other times in the movie, you know exactly what he's talking about.
Right.
And I think I was never, although I do really appreciate the fact that they had, a strong science advisor in the, the later Star Trek shows. And I do think that if there's one thing that bugs me about Discovery, is that there seems to be a clear kind of absence of a overarching science, advisor / director, who's really making sure that all this stuff is grounded in science. It's kind of a half and half thing for me, because if you look at the original show, they had science advisors and they thought this stuff out, but at the same time they had invented a whole universe that makes no sense in terms of contemporary science. That we know that faster than light travel is not going to work this way. We know I think we probably have a very good idea that there is nothing like the sheer volume of intelligent races in our, spatial neighborhood that Star Trek depicts. So on a lot of levels, the Star Trek universe is fantasy.
Yeah.
And we also know that visually the universe is not as colorful and magical looking as it's depicted in Star Trek. And that, like, all these astronomical images that we see that are like beautiful magentas and greens are actually color corrected, and it's much more kind of monochromatic and dull out there.
Right.
So, someone was talking about the whole Mud episode and all the crazy stuff, that we've got this kind of crazy space whale and all sorts of things going on, but it fits in with the level of imagination and kind of fun that the Star Trek has sort of established from the beginning. And I think I'm fine with it kind of rolling that way. I would like to see a little bit more steering of the science in it, but if I have to choose between it being, entertaining and being scientific, I probably would go for more for entertaining at this point.
I agree 100%. So I think that's a good way to jump over to episode 7, Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad, which I understand is a reference to the Iliad or the Odyssey. I could be wrong about that, and frankly, I am not going to research it. I'm just going to say that's a long episode title. Which essentially, and I want to see what you think of this. This, for me, seemed almost like a 3rd or 4th season episode. Because a lot of times where the first season is just establishing the basics of every character and where they're starting from. Second season is giving them some experience, and we see them working together. And then this 3rd season is where you see both, you reveal a little bit more character, and they have some shared experience. So when these kind of cool Star Trek-y threats, like time loops and stuff, manifest themselves, the drama is a lot more rich and interesting and a lot more engaging. And here, maybe I am a sucker for a Brandon Braga-style crazy plot device, but I really liked this episode. I liked watching the characters run their way through this. I liked Fenton Mudd as this level of villain and kind of this kind of pathetic level of ambition where I have this thing that lets me go back a half an hour in time infinitely, and what I'm going to use to do is steal a ship rather than figure out a way to rule an empire, but whatever. What did you think of this one?
I really like this, and I to your point, I think if I had a frustration with it, at least initially, it was in the fact that the pacing is so kind of virtuoso on this episode, and we are still kind of establishing the characters, and there's so much ambition in what they were doing. Mm-hmm. I as it was, kind of flying along, I was thinking, I feel like I could use maybe a little bit more breathing space with, with the characters. I thought particularly with Lorca, who still has a major kind of character moment in this, and plays a key role, but I felt like he was a little bit sidelined in terms of the action, and wasn't, not that he's necessarily the driver in the show overall, but I felt he in particular was a bit sidelined in this episode. But I thought the more I think about it, the more I really like it. And what really kind of finally sold me was, first of all, the whole thing it reminded me of like a Scorsese movie, the way they kept the camera moving, the pacing, that whole montage of Mudd executing Lorca. It's got some great lines. There's one where he says, like, there's so many ways to blow this ship up, it's almost like it's a design flaw. And then another one where he says, I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but I'm actually getting tired of gloating. And he is Rainn Wilson. He must have been having a blast doing this, because I was thinking even down. For one thing, his character has such a great entrance. Walking out of the maw of the space monster wearing like what looks like, it's apparently like a Tellarite space helmet, because it's got these big antennae on, which also kind of turns him into this kind of hilarious spoof of a alien spaceman threatening the Enterprise. The way, if you watch his body language when he's like marching around shooting people, it's just it's a guy inside a space suit, so you can't see his face, but he creates such a great attitude. for his character, just like such supreme, confidence that he's done this a million times before, and there's basically nothing that can stop him.
Yeah.
And as I think the key to the show, obviously we knew from that last week that they're in a time loop. It's basically, it's time squared and cause and effect. It's the idea is and Groundhog Day is something we've all seen 1,000 times before, including on Star Trek. So what I loved about this is there was not a bunch of time wasted with the characters sitting around pondering what the hell is going on. They know within the first 5 minutes what's going on. So everything then is about how are we going to solve this problem? How are we going to deal with it? What is Bud actually trying to do? And I think they integrated all that beautifully. And I think what really pushed it over the top for me was how Burnham finally traps Mudd, and the whole use of this blue pill that kills people horribly, which was a throwback to another Next Generation episode, The Most Toys, I think, where they demonstrate that there's this horrible blaster that kills people in this awful way. And so then you show that happening, and then that's going to be the payoff, a dramatic payoff. And I love the fact that, they create the idea that the only way to stop Mudd is to make him go back in time again, which he's basically gotten everything that he needs and has no requirement to do that anymore. He's basically won, and then her basically taking the blue pill, killing herself, and it's also, I love because they show Tyler and another generic crewman being killed this way, and writhing in pain. And so when she takes that, that she's going to die horribly, but she doesn't register any emotion. She's completely calm because she's been raised as a Vulcan, which I thought was a great kind of demonstration of her character. And then of course the whole story sort of revolves around her growing potential romance with Tyler, and whether she's going to be really able to fully embrace that and explore that. And I thought that was incorporated, maybe not flawlessly, but relatively well within the story. I think they've done a great job in the last few episodes of kind of grounding the stories around Burnham, who's not, I've seen some complaints about, well, why, we shouldn't be centering the show around someone who's not going to show a lot of emotion. But I think her, her performance has been great in all the episodes, and that she's, able to show someone who wants to explore emotions, and who has her own reasons for either doing that or not doing that. And I think that having her as the anchor for the show has so far worked very well.
I definitely agree. I thought, it's funny now that I'm thinking back a little bit about some of the things that you said previously about how Star Trek would register or would be able to have ambitions to be a modern prestige show. We've talked about this several times, but watching last night, it's almost as though they did some sort of controlled experiment where they took an idea that a previous Star Trek episode had done, or series had done, changed it enough to make it interesting and updated and new, but seeing the new techniques, like you're right, I was blown away by the camera work and the montage of Lorca being killed over and over and over again, and the way that they dealt with that, and watching Burnham realize the problem. We've got to get him to set time back when he doesn't need to. The only way I can have him do it is to walk in, tell him the information that's going to make him want me, but I can't let him have me. So I guess I'm going to have to do this. And we've seen episodes of Star Trek where the the ship blows up before, and it's a very dramatic thing. I'm kind of a sucker for any episode of Star Trek where the ship blows up, and then after the break, it's back to before, and they, go back up to that point. And watching her, kill herself and think her way through this, using this weird concept of looping time to her advantage, I thought was really fun. But just the filmmaking and the writing seems on such another level compared to where other Star Trek shows have done this kind of idea, that this might be my sweet spot for this show, which is having enough Star Trek-y, I hate to say it like that, but I'll just say it like that, enough Star Trek-y weird gimmickry with the plotting, but this new level of effects, this new level of filmmaking, this new level of technique, it's just supremely satisfying.
Yeah, this reminds me actually of what Spielberg kind of did. I mean, not to, we're kind of, I'm comparing this to Scorsese and Spielberg, which might be a little bit over the top, but it's the same kind of idea, I think, which, Spielberg, when he did, at the beginning of his career, he did Duel and Jaws and Close Encounters. Those were all kind of pulpy ideas that, might have been done in the 50s or 60s in this like kind of cheesy way. But what he did was take those, kind of pulpy genre ideas and said, okay, let's treat this completely realistically and let's really make people believe that this is really happening.
Yeah.
And with Star Trek's been around so long that, it has all of its conventions, and the fans are going to go along with an episode that just says, okay, we're in a time loop, we're just going to execute that idea with our characters.
Right.
And that's it. And this, I think, does that. And I've already seen, reaction online where people are like, oh, I love this one. This one was the most Star Trek of, any of the episodes so far.
I'm kind of in that ballpark.
So, which is true. This one, and I also love the idea that they get out of the, okay, what's going on with the Klingons, even though the Klingons are part of the story. And so we maintain that thread, but it goes outside of, showing, Klingon speaking Klingon and deals with a completely different idea. And it looks like the episode next week is going to do the same thing too. So that's something that I've been really hoping to see from this show is you've got to be able to go out and tell different kinds of stories, and tell stories that it's got to use the conventions of Star Trek, and that that otherwise why be Star Trek? Why not call it something else? That's something,
right?
I see fans say, they were saying from the beginning, well, if this is going to be so different from Star Trek, why don't they just call it something else, and then I won't be mad anymore,
right?
But what this show's got to do, and what it seems to be doing fairly well, I think, is to embrace a lot of the conventions of Star Trek, but try to bring it into a new era of filmmaking and storytelling as we watch it on TV today. So
yeah,
it does seem to really be picking up steam and getting better. There's no doubt. I think this show started in a kind of a clunky place, and seeming a little uncertain of what it was trying to do, but it seems to be getting more confident as it goes along.
You know what? I think that kind of crystallizes my thinking for it, in that it started out really promising and I liked it, and I kind of liked the first 3 or 4 or 5 episodes being very linked, very regimented in the story. They were telling one story. But I did find myself missing it's kind of like, okay, if I'm not really excited for the Klingon War this week, well, too bad, because that's the show.
Exactly,
and that's what we're doing. And this one is kind of like the perfect sweet spot. It's there, it carries along the serialization, but we're going to go off and do this other cool thing. And I think if Discovery can maintain those things where we'll get a run of 2 or 3 episodes that really it's almost, I guess, kind of like the structure of the X-Files, where you would have some mythology episodes that carry along the larger backstory, and then you'd have Monster of the Week when that's fun, and then you'd have a run or one episode that carries water for the backstory. It's just, if they could pull all that off, that would be very satisfying.
So what we all remember about the X-Files is that the mythology all came to nothing.
Well,
and so that's that I think is right now the big challenge that I see for this show. And we've already kind of heard that the Klingon arc is going to be, I think, mostly settled or covered in this first season. So, even if this turns out to be kind of rotten, ultimately, I don't think we're going to see ensuing seasons revolve around that so much, and they're going to explore other ideas. But the big challenge, I think, right now that I see from this show is, can they make the whole Klingon story satisfying? Because it's already kind of off-putting in terms of, watching the Klingons be subtitled and having to act through 40 pounds of head latex.
Right.
And I don't think we have yet seen a really satisfying presentation of the Klingon story. And obviously there's much more. Right now we've got, an admiral being held hostage by the Klingons. There's obviously much more in the story to tell, and so I think that they've definitely created a big challenge for themselves in executing that, because so far it's been a little bit problematic. But I think pretty much everything else on the show, I think, is really, really cranking along well, and it's actually getting better than I had sort of hoped it was going to be.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's wrap up with 2 quick questions or thoughts on the Klingon storyline. One of which from last week, Lethe, did Lorca know that the Admiral was going to get captured by the Klingons when he put her on that shuttle to go to the peace talks? There was a couple lingering shots, and maybe they just do this for effect, where he seemed to know something, he seemed to suspect something. There seemed to be a moment kind of like he was saying goodbye to her silently with his eyes.
Yeah.
Is that something you picked up?
It seems like, it certainly seems like it's an element there, and I had at least one person, say to me, that was the most obvious trap, I've ever seen. So,
right.
Clearly it read that way. And the whole question of what Lorca is doing, is Lorca just out of control, and he's just got his own kind of survival instincts, but he doesn't have a master plan? Does he have a master plan? Is he, did he? I think I've seen some, talk to the effect that he, maybe the whole meeting with Tyler was prearranged, and he knew that he was going to get. That doesn't make any sense to me, really. Right. And that, that's the other question about Tyler. I don't know if this was your follow-up question.
This exactly was my follow-up.
Yeah, the whole idea that Tyler is like is what Bach, or is he's it's the same actor playing.
Right,
the Klingon character, and so whether Tyler is basically him or he's a Klingon spy, to me, his behavior, it seems a huge leap to say that this guy who's like clearly relates very well to people and understands the nuances of human relationships very, very well, and seems to feel, what humans feel in their interactions with other people. The idea that this guy is just faking all of it seems hard to swallow. I've also heard another theory that he's like a sleeper agent, so he's not consciously aware that he's, working for the Klingons, and I guess that would make a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
But there's this whole question of like, what do the Klingons look like? And the Enterprise had a whole like lame 2-story arc about explaining with some stupid technobabble about some virus or something that
eugenics,
made
Jeff.
them look.
It was eugenics the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't think there is necessarily a great explanation for how that works. I mean,
Right.
I do think it makes sense that the Klingons would be able to, change certain people in their race to look more like humans, but the way it was presented in Enterprise, it seemed to be like more of like an accident, and that seemed like a dumb idea to me.
Yeah.
So and now we're showing these Klingons who are radically different looking from. It's not just like that they have like a bony ridge. They've got this like completely different shaped head. So it's even kind of harder to swallow, like just making a Klingon be a convincing person walking around who can fool everyone on the crew into thinking that they're human. So
Yeah.
I don't know that I buy it, but certainly the kind of the production has muddied the waters by, I guess, changing something on IMDb to make it look like that there's a different actor playing, Vok, a guy who doesn't actually exist and stuff.
Right.
So I don't know whether it's they're just kind of screwing with us or what, but obviously it remains to be seen. And Tyler is playing an important role. I mean, even if it's just in terms of Burnham's relationship with them, and given her whole background with the Klingons, obviously it's a huge development if he is a Klingon spy, because he would have great motivation to want to kill her. I mean, that's another thing that to me undermines the whole idea, because in this episode particularly, Tyler's got half a dozen chances to sell out the whole ship and burn them to the Klingons.
Right.
Why, he can just go along with Mudd's plan and everything's great. So it's I don't know that I buy it, but I could be wrong.
I think the fact that they're messing around with the actor's name with Vok tells me something's going on, but I don't necessarily. I'm with you. The more we see Tyler interacting on the ship, the less realistic it seems. But I could definitely see Vok turning into something else, and some other character turning out to be Vok down the road. But we'll see. Maybe they have a master plan. They've certainly gone through enough pre-production and enough delays to have had time to think this out 3 or 4 different ways. So anyway, Jeff, thank you so much for talking about Star Trek Discovery. Is there anything else that you would like to say before we sign off?
No, I just I'm really enjoying the show. And the next episode, I'm glad that they're going to do an episode that focuses on Saru, because I think he's had some terrific scenes in the early episodes of the first, like I think 3 through 5, and he seemed to me pretty underserved in the last 2.
Right.
So I've I like that character, and I'm glad that he's not being shuffled off to the side.
Right. So, all right. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. For Sonia.
Thank you.
And Alexandra, who will be here next week. And Jeff, that's Chris saying goodbye.
Bye-bye.
The Dorking Out Show is on Twitter at Dorking Out Show, where you can find Chris at Jet Jurgens and Sonia at The Sonia Show. You can read about Sonia's random adventures at thesoniashow.com and track the slow and creeping progress of Chris's novel and his other hijinks at jetjurgens.com. You can find out more about the Dorking Out Show at dorkingoutshow.com. While you're over there, you can support us by giving us a review on iTunes. We have a handy-dandy iTunes link to whisk you right back to 2007, where you can leave your review and 5-star rating in iTunes. We'd do it for your podcast. Want to dork out even more? Well, you can sign up for our newsletter, where you'll get all the headlines we use as fuel for the show. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening.